In the heart of Eunnel, a town once filled with prayer and laughter, now stands silence. They say the ground remembers every secret, especially the ones buried in blood. He was called Man of God. People knelt before him, kissed his ring, and called his words divine. But behind those golden robes hid something darker than sin. Some called him Pastor Daniel. Others whispered his name only in fear. When truth began to rise, he called it rebellion. When his lies began to crumble, he called it attack. But no man can hide from the justice of heaven. The innocent never die in vain. This is not just a story of one man. It is the story of power, greed, and the price of false miracles. Eunnel will never forget. For when lies build a temple, truth will bring it down. In the small town of Eunnel, people spoke of one man with great respect, Pastor Daniel. He was young, handsome, and always smiling. His church, Mountain of Divine Light, stood tall at the edge of the town like a palace. Every Sunday, crowds filled the place. Women in bright headscarves, men in fine suits, and children with shiny shoes. They came from far and near, believing Pastor Daniel's prayers could change their lives. He often said, "My God is not a poor God. If you follow me, your story must change." People clapped. They believed him. Offerings flowed like water. Cars lined up every Sunday. Pastor Daniel's mansion stood beside the church, painted white and gold. He drove a black SUV that shone like glass in the sun. But few knew how deep his darkness ran. One of his church members, Grace, had joined the church 2 years earlier. She was humble and pregnant with her first child. Her husband, Moses, was a carpenter who worked day and night to provide for her. They were poor but happy until Grace fell ill one day. Moses rushed her to the hospital, but the doctor said everything looked normal. Still, Grace grew weaker each day. One Sunday, Pastor Daniel called her out during service. "Sister Grace, I see an evil spirit fighting your womb," he said in his deep voice. "Come to my private prayer room tonight. God told me to deliver you alone." Grace nodded slowly, believing him. Moses was not comfortable with the idea. "Why not pray for her here in the church?" he asked. But Pastor Daniel smiled and said, "My son, some battles need private prayers." That night, Grace dressed quietly and went to the church as instructed. The moon was full, the compound silent. The security man opened the gate when she mentioned Pastor Daniel's name. Inside, candles burned dimly. The pastor stood in a white robe humming a song. He asked her to kneel. "Close your eyes," he said softly, "and pray." Grace obeyed. But as she prayed, she heard footsteps behind her. Not one, not two, several. Before she could turn, everything went dark. The next morning, Moses waited for his wife to return, but she never did. He ran to the church, but the guards said Pastor Daniel was away on a 3-day mountain prayer. The police searched, but no trace of Grace was found. The pastor comforted Moses, saying, "The devil is a liar. Keep believing. She will return." Weeks passed. Months passed. Moses lost hope. The once smiling carpenter became a shadow of himself. Still, Pastor Daniel's fame continued to grow. More miracles, more offerings, more praise. But beneath the golden walls of the church, something was buried. Something the earth could not keep quiet forever. Weeks turned into months, and the memory of Grace slowly faded from the town of Eunnel. Some people whispered that she had run away. Others said witches must have taken her unborn child. Only Moses refused to believe any of it. Every morning, he still walked past Mountain of Divine Light Church, staring at the golden building as if it might speak. He looked thinner now, his once bright eyes now hollow. He spent his days fixing chairs no one ordered and nights talking to himself. But one evening, as the sun began to set, something unusual happened. A small boy ran to his workshop holding a white piece of cloth. "Uncle Moses," the boy said, panting, "see what I found near the church fence." Moses took the cloth with trembling hands. It was torn and had a familiar blue flower pattern, the same wrapper Grace wore the night she left. His heart stopped for a moment. He looked toward the church compound, and his chest tightened. That night, Moses could not sleep. He stood by the window watching the church lights flicker. He saw shadows moving around the back of the building, men carrying sacks toward a corner of the yard. He rubbed his eyes, wondering if grief had made him see things. The next day, he decided to confront Pastor Daniel again. But when he arrived, 2 ushers blocked the gate. "The pastor is not seeing visitors today," one said coldly. Moses raised his voice. "I just want to know what happened to my wife." They pushed him away, warning him never to cause trouble. He returned home broken. That evening, as he sat on the dusty floor, an old woman from the church came to visit him quietly. Her name was Mama Esther, one of the oldest members. "My son," she said softly, "you must be careful. You are touching fire with bare hands." Moses frowned. "What do you mean, Mama?" The woman looked around nervously. "There are things happening in that church that you cannot see. I served there for 5 years. I saw girls go missing, and everyone was told to keep quiet or face curses." Moses stared in disbelief. "You mean Pastor Daniel?" Mama Esther sighed deeply. "My child, not everything that shines is gold. I once saw him take a young pregnant woman to the basement. The next morning she was gone. He said she traveled. But I found her sandals behind the altar." Moses felt his heart pound. Tears filled his eyes. "Then we must report this. We must tell the police." But the old woman shook her head quickly. "Who will believe you? That man has friends everywhere, in the police, in the government. If you speak, they will call you mad." Moses clenched his fists. "I will not keep quiet. Grace deserves justice." The old woman touched his shoulder. "If you want justice, find proof. Only the truth can break his walls." From that day, Moses began to watch. Every night, he hid near the church fence, studying the shadows, listening to the whispers. He noticed that every month, during full moon, Pastor Daniel held a special night of deliverance. Only a few people were allowed to attend, mostly young pregnant women. One night, Moses disguised himself as a church worker and sneaked in through the back gate. He wore an old uniform and covered his face with a cap. Inside, candles burned everywhere. The air was thick with incense. Pastor Daniel stood in the center of the hall, his white robe glowing under the dim lights. Around him knelt 6 pregnant women praying. Moses hid behind a column, watching. Pastor Daniel raised his hands. "Tonight, the Lord will purify your wombs from the spirit of darkness." The women cried, "Amen." He began to chant strange words. The lights flickered. 2 men in black entered quietly from the side door. Moses' heart raced. He recognized them as the same men he saw carrying sacks before. He tried to move closer, but suddenly a guard spotted him. "Hey, who are you?" the guard shouted. Moses ran, but they chased him through the compound. He jumped over the fence, scraping his arm badly, and disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, the church denied everything. Pastor Daniel called him a madman controlled by demons. People believed the pastor, not Moses. For weeks, Moses hid in shame, but he refused to give up. He decided to go to the next town, to visit a journalist named Tund, who was known for exposing corruption. Tund listened carefully as Moses told his story. "If what you're saying is true," Tund said, "we'll need evidence, photos, recordings, something the world can't deny." They planned together. Tund gave Moses a small recording device hidden in a wristwatch. "Attend the next deliverance service," he said. "Get us what we need." When the next full moon came, Moses prepared carefully. He wore a cleaner's uniform again and entered the church with the evening crowd. This time he kept calm. The service started like before: worship, dancing, prayer. Then Pastor Daniel called out a young woman, heavily pregnant, crying and weak. He said, "This one is chosen for special deliverance tonight." Moses felt his stomach twist. He turned on the recorder. When everyone began praying loudly, Pastor Daniel led the woman toward the basement door. Moses followed slowly from a distance. As they entered, he saw what no one would ever believe. The basement was dim and cold. On the walls were strange markings. Candles burned beside bowls filled with blood. The woman screamed, "Please, man of God, don't hurt me." But before she could run, the two men in black grabbed her. Moses hid behind a pillar, shaking, recording everything. He saw Pastor Daniel take out a golden knife, chanting words that chilled the air. The woman screamed again, and then silence. Moses fell to his knees, tears streaming. He wanted to rush out but knew it would cost his life. He waited until everyone left, then ran out of the compound, his heart racing faster than his legs. He met Tund the next morning and handed him the recording. "Here," he said, his voice trembling. "This is it." Tund played the audio. The sound of chanting, screaming, and the pastor's voice filled the room. The journalist looked shocked. This is enough to shake the whole country. They decided to release the story through an online newspaper that night. But before they could publish, men in black suits stormed Tund's house. Someone had leaked their plan. Tund barely escaped through the back door, but Moses was caught. They took him to an unknown place, a dark room smelling of damp earth. He was tied up, beaten, and left hungry for days. When Pastor Daniel finally walked in, his face was calm, almost smiling. "You think you can destroy the work of God?" he said quietly. "You're too small, Moses. People see miracles because I make them believe. Without me, this town will fall." Moses spat weakly. "You are no man of God. You are a murderer." Pastor Daniel leaned close, whispering, "Then let your God save you." He left, and the door locked behind him. But destiny is strange. What Pastor Daniel didn't know was that one of his new church workers, a young man named Samuel, had seen Moses being taken away. Samuel had joined the church recently, hoping to serve God, but he had noticed too many secrets. That night, Samuel followed the same men and discovered where Moses was held, a small house behind the church's guest quarters. He waited until dawn, then sneaked in through the window and untied Moses. "Come," he whispered. "We must leave now." They escaped through the forest and made it to alone in his golden mansion, staring at his reflection in the mirror. For the first time, he felt something he had not felt in years: fear. The morning after the mysterious storm that shook the whole village, people gathered at the church ground, whispering in fear. The strong wind that blew the night before had uprooted part of the church fence, and behind it, something horrifying was found. A piece of cloth stained with dried blood and a woman's necklace half buried in the soil. Old Mama Grace, who swept the church compound every Saturday, recognized the necklace immediately. "This belongs to Lydia," she said, trembling. Lydia had been one of the pregnant women who mysteriously disappeared months ago. The crowd grew silent, fear spreading like wildfire. Meanwhile, Pastor Daniel was nowhere to be found. His mansion gates were locked, and his phone switched off. The elders of the community decided to inform the police, but before they arrived, rumors spread faster than fire in Harmattan. "The man of God is using people for rituals." In the market, in the street corners, at the riverbank, people whispered, "So it's true. No wonder his wealth keeps growing." Some said they had seen shadows moving under the ground at night near the church. Others swore they heard voices crying from beneath the altar. By afternoon, the police arrived with shovels, spades, and a small group of men. The chief of the village, Chief Allowale, gave permission to dig the ground behind the church. The first few feet revealed only soil and old bricks. But as they dug deeper, a foul stench filled the air. Everyone stepped back, covering their noses. Then one of the men shouted, "I see something!" The crowd rushed closer, and what they saw froze their hearts. A shallow grave, with remains of multiple bodies wrapped in church cloth. The murmuring turned to screams. Women fainted. Men held their heads in disbelief. The police ordered everyone back as they uncovered more graves, all beneath the holy ground. Just as the last grave was opened, a loud thunder struck even though the sky was clear. The villagers looked up in shock. Dark clouds began forming above only the church compound. It was as if the heavens themselves were angry. A heavy wind swirled around the altar, toppling chairs and scattering the holy books. The large wooden cross on the wall fell and split in two. That same night, Pastor Daniel's wife, Ruth, appeared at the police station. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "Please, I want to speak," she said. In the interrogation room, she confessed everything. She told them how her husband had once been a humble preacher until a strange man named Baba Okoto came to him, promising unlimited power and wealth if he would make sacrifices under the church. He told him the church must be built on blood, she whispered. At first, Daniel refused, but when the congregation started leaving, he agreed. From then on, Pastor Daniel performed secret midnight rituals, using the pregnant women who came to him for prayers. He buried them under the altar and mixed their blood with oil used for anointing. Each time he did, his wealth doubled, new cars, lands, branches everywhere. Ruth wept as she spoke. I begged him to stop, but he said the spirits would kill us both if we did. The last one he buried was Lydia. She screamed his name till she went silent. The confession spread like wildfire. Reporters came from nearby towns. The police launched a manhunt for Pastor Daniel, but he seemed to have vanished. Days passed, and strange things began to happen in his mansion. Neighbors said they saw lights flickering at midnight, even though no one lived there. Some heard loud cries, others saw shadows moving through the windows. One night, the caretaker who guarded the compound ran away barefoot, screaming that he saw the ghosts of pregnant women walking in the hall. Then, on the seventh night, Pastor Daniel returned. He looked different, pale, weak, his once fine suit torn and dusty. He went straight to the police station himself. "I surrender," he said quietly. But when the officers looked at his hands, they noticed his palms were bleeding as if he had been digging the ground with his bare hands. "I can't sleep. They won't let me," he muttered, trembling. He confessed to everything, the rituals, the killings, and the hidden chambers under the church where the sacrifices took place. "I thought I was serving God," he cried. "But I was feeding demons." The police took him into custody, but that night, strange things continued. In his cell, other inmates screamed that he was shouting in another voice, deep and echoing, as if two people spoke through him. The guards rushed in and saw him banging his head against the wall, shouting, "They want their blood back." He died before morning. No one could explain how, no wounds, no marks. Only his body cold and stiff, with his eyes wide open in terror. The next day, the church was sealed. The government demolished it, and in its place, the villagers built a memorial garden for the lost souls. Pastor Daniel's wife left the village with her children, vowing to dedicate her life to helping women and orphans. Months later, peace returned. But every time people passed by that garden, they felt a soft wind blow, like whispers of forgiveness. The story of Pastor Daniel became a warning across villages. Do not hide evil under the name of God. Children grew up hearing it, learning that true faith is not measured by riches but by kindness, and that anyone who uses religion to deceive others will face justice, if not by man, then by God himself. After Pastor Daniel's death, Eunnel was never the same again. The once bustling town fell into silence. People feared going near the ruins of the church, even in daylight. Grass grew where prayers once rose, and birds refused to perch on the broken walls. The air around that land carried something heavy, a quiet sorrow that words could not explain. Chief Olawale, the village head, called for a cleansing ritual. "No town can prosper when blood cries beneath its soil," he said. The elders agreed. They invited spiritual leaders, both Christian and traditional, to purify the land. At sunrise, drums echoed across Eunnel. The elders, dressed in white wrappers, walked barefoot toward the old church ground, carrying calabashes of water mixed with herbs. Behind them came a group of young men singing softly, and women holding candles, their faces solemn. When they reached the ground, the eldest priest lifted his hand and prayed, "Let peace return. Let the souls find rest." As he spoke, a cool wind blew, bending the grass as if the earth itself sighed in relief. The ritual lasted all day, songs, prayers, tears, until the last candle melted into the soil. Then silence. Everyone felt it. A lightness, a quiet peace, as though the land finally forgave. Months passed, and life began to return to normal. Traders reopened their shops, children played in the streets again, and laughter returned to Eunnel. But one person could not forget. Moses, the husband of Grace, the woman who disappeared first. He had grown older and thinner, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. Every evening, he went to the memorial garden built on the old church land. He brought flowers and sat under the tree, talking to his late wife as if she were still there. One evening, as he prayed, he saw a small light floating among the flowers. At first, he thought it was fireflies, but then the light grew brighter, forming the faint outline of a woman. He froze. The voice that followed was soft, calm, and familiar. "Moses," he gasped. "Grace." Her image smiled gently. "The innocent never die in vain. Tell them to keep faith, for true light never hides in darkness." Before he could reply, the light faded into the wind. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, my love," he whispered. From that day, Moses changed. He began repairing the village church that had long been abandoned before Pastor Daniel's rise, a small mud building at the center of town. People mocked him at first, saying he was wasting his time. But he kept working day and night, repairing the roof, painting the walls, and fixing the benches. Soon, others began to join him, young men, women, even children. Everyone brought something: nails, wood, paint, or just their hands. And slowly, the small church came alive again. When the work was done, Moses stood before the crowd and said, "This house shall not be built on blood, but on love. Let every prayer here be for truth." The new pastor who took over was a humble man named Emmanuel, a teacher who left the city to serve God in Eunnel. He didn't have fine cars or gold rings, but his words carried peace. People started returning to church, not for miracles, but for faith. Pastor Emmanuel often reminded them, God's true power is not in the noise, but in the heart that forgives. Under his care, the town healed. He visited widows, fed orphans, and even built a small home for women who had been abused. Soon, a new spirit filled Eunnel, one of unity, kindness, and truth. But something strange still happened sometimes. Late at night, people passing the memorial garden said they could hear soft singing, like a choir of women. Some said it was the spirits of those who died, now at peace, blessing the land they once wept upon. Others said it was angels watching over Eunnel, ensuring darkness would never return. Years later, Moses grew old. On his final day, he sat under the same tree at the memorial garden, smiling as the evening sun painted the sky gold. He whispered, "Grace, I'm coming home," and quietly closed his eyes. When people found him, his face looked peaceful, almost smiling. They buried him beside the garden, under a stone that read, "Love is stronger than evil. Truth is louder than wealth." From that day, every child in Eunnel grew up knowing the story of Pastor Daniel, not as gossip, but as a reminder. Parents told their children, "Let your heart be pure. Let your hands be clean. Never let greed blind your spirit." And so the name Eunnel, once feared, became a symbol of rebirth, a town that rose from deceit into divine light.